Thanks for joining us here on Service to School Stories. Your hosts for this season are Alec Emmert, Service to School CEO and Navy veteran,
and Sydney Mathis, Chief Program Officer and former college admissions officer. This season will cover topics as it relates to higher education, military service transition, and career opportunities and outcomes for veterans. Join us as we share student stories, inside tips from the admissions office, and conversations with employers actively hiring student veterans. Here we go. Today, we are joined on the Service to School Stories podcast by Patricia Wei. She is the Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Yale, and student Alec Buffi. He's a junior at Yale in the Eli Whitney Students Program, and he is a veteran of the Air Force. So Patricia and Alec, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today. Really excited to chat with you both. I'm going to turn it over so you all can introduce yourselves to our listeners and give them a little bit of an experience about your time, Patricia, in admissions, and Alec, your time as a student at Yale. So Patricia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sydney. I'm an Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Yale, and among my many responsibilities, the most relevant here is that I'm Director of Veterans Outreach and Director of Admissions for the Eli Whitney Students Program. I know we're going to talk sort of in depth about the Eli Whitney Students Program during this podcast, but essentially, I am responsible for the admission of adult students, including military veterans. I've been working with veterans in the admissions space since 2010. At that time, Service to School did not exist, and there were no resources for transitioning service members or veterans to guide them through their college search journey to highly selective colleges like Yale. So I'm really grateful to Service to School for providing such an invaluable resource. Yale has a small but growing number of student veterans, and they have very much enriched the Yale community. And I think that Yale has opened up lots of new opportunities and experiences for them. And though I've worked at Yale and with veterans for a long time, I'm very much of an imposter because I did not attend Yale, nor am I a military veteran. So joining me today is an actual live current Yale student veteran, and that's Alec.
Yes, Alec, excited to have you here as well. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here too. Nice to meet you. My name is Alec. I am a junior at Yale. And just to be clear, this is my third year. I came in with some credits, but I'm going to do the full 4-year experience. I'm an Air Force veteran, and I'm studying computer science. Not really sure where that's going to take me yet, but I'm pretty excited about it. And just to let you know in advance, that is not what I started out as.
Oh, some good follow-up questions I have for you there. Okay, Patricia, I want to circle back to you. So you mentioned you were at Yale before Service to School even existed, and kind of stepped into this space to provide opportunities for student veterans, but also adult learners who are returning and pursuing higher education. Certainly, the work with Service to School veteran recruitment has evolved, but before the partnership here at Service to School, was that kind of the main focus of the Eli Whitney Students Program, which we'll talk about what that was. But how have you seen that adult learner student veteran recruitment process or approach change in the years since you've been there?
Sure. I think in 2010, we might have had 2 or 3 student veterans at the undergraduate level at Yale. And I really became Director of Veterans Outreach really by default because the veteran students were primarily in the Eli Whitney Students Program. And that's how sort of I ended up sort of developing my expertise in that area. Now we have roughly half of our Eli Whitney students are undergraduate veterans. And so there has been sort of an incremental increase in the number of student veterans at Yale. And it is something that I'm very proud of. It is something that Yale feels is important. We feel that student veterans, as well as older students, bring a very different perspective, and they have life experiences and professional experiences that 19, 20-year-olds simply don't have.
Absolutely.
And recently, President Salovey, the president of Yale, has sort of affirmed our commitment to increasing the number of non-traditional students and student veterans and supporting them at Yale.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's helpful context into understanding what the Eli Whitney Students Program is and why we're here talking about it today, specifically for our student population. So can you explain just briefly what the Eli Whitney Students Program is for our listeners?
Sure. Working with Eli Whitney students is the most rewarding part of my job. So I'm thrilled that I get to share information about this program with your audience. The Eli Whitney Students Program is a unique program designed specifically for adult students wishing to pursue a traditional in-person Yale education. So if you completed high school more than 5 years ago and you have not yet received a bachelor's degree, then you're eligible to apply to the Eli Whitney Students Program. The average age of Eli Whitney students is 30, ranging from mid-20s to early 60s. They include veterans, but it's not an exclusively veterans program. They're also artists, community activists, parents, entrepreneurs. And this is a much more flexible pathway, allowing adult learners to take classes full or part-time. Their Yale advisors have experience guiding students at a different life stage who have different needs than 18 to 21-year-olds. Eli Whitney students do not live on campus. They live off campus in graduate housing. I also want to kind of talk to you about what the Eli Whitney Students Program is not. So it's not a separate school or division within Yale. All Eli Whitney students are Yale College students. They take the same classes, they have the same academic requirements, they have access to the same research opportunities, abroad experiences, and extracurricular activities. They receive the same degree, either a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science, as other Yale undergraduates. And we also offer generous need-based financial aid, just like we do for other Yale students. The Eli Whitney Students is not an online program. Oftentimes people, when they hear, oh, it's a program for adult students, it's an online program. It is not. We do not offer online classes. We do not have evening or weekend classes. And while many Eli Whitney students do take classes part-time, they're not required to do so. It is not a program designed for people working full-time and taking classes on the side. It's a full Yale experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And some follow-up questions about that. So you mentioned it's a degree pathway for students who graduated over 5 years ago and haven't earned a degree yet. So to confirm for our listeners, students can apply as a first-year student or a transfer student to the Eli Whitney Students Program?
Yes, absolutely. So veterans are not restricted to the Eli Whitney Students Program. There are 3 pathways through which students can apply to Yale: as a first-year student, as a transfer student, or to the Eli Whitney Students Program. The Eli Whitney Students Program tends to be the better fit for most veterans because it's designed for adult students. And roughly half the Eli Whitney students are military veterans. Alec, I know, could probably have applied as a transfer student or an Eli Whitney student, for example, but he ended up choosing the Eli Whitney Students Program.
Got it. Yeah, Alec. And then from the student perspective, what do you think is, certainly the best benefit to the Eli Whitney Students Program, and why did you decide to go that route versus the transfer route?
I think as an adult learner, my favorite aspect of the Eli Whitney program is its flexibility. So I've had semesters where I've taken as little as 2 classes and semesters where I've taken 4 classes, just depending on what's going on in my life. And I really, really appreciate that. And I don't think I realized how much I appreciated it until I had it. And I also think that from an outsider perspective, when I was thinking about applying to the university, the thing that was really attractive to me was the cohort aspect. I feel like I'm a Eli, but also a Yale College student. So I have my friends that are also adult learners, and some of them are veterans and some of them have worked before. Like Patricia said, we have a lot of really diverse backgrounds. But also I have a lot of friends that are traditional students that I've met in my classes.
I think coming with that community, right, is really important, especially for a lot of our students that are transitioning out of the military and going to college for the first time on a traditional college campus, right? Like having people that have similarities and adult experiences just kind of makes that transition feel less overwhelming. You mentioned student housing, which I know is important for a lot of our applicants. And you've talked to me a little bit about what it's like to live in technically graduate housing, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want the dorm parties, or, like I want an adult experience. So what is that like for you there?
Yeah, so I know that Eli Whitney students have the opportunity to live in graduate housing, but I actually decided to live off campus. Just my personal choice. I think that it would be really cool to live on campus and experience a little bit more campus life. But I live with my girlfriend, and we kind of just want a little bit more of like our own space. And we're getting a dog too, so that's something I wouldn't be able to do if I was living on campus.
Yes.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so just like more of your own kind of space, your own housing.
Yeah.
But knowing that it is an option, I think is really important.
Sorry, Patricia, go ahead.
I was going to say, sort of, in some ways, you have the best of both worlds. You're you're an adult. If you want sort of more privacy, you don't want to live kind of in a dorm-like situation, you can have your own space, but there is no way to avoid sort of the Yale undergraduate community. You're very much part of the Yale community. I think sometimes people think, oh, the Eli Whitney Students Program, it's for adult students. They're very isolated. They're very separated, but that's not the case. Eli Whitney students are very involved in the undergraduate community, but you do have, like Alec said, this additional sort of community of more mature students, and so that's nice. I think academically, our Eli Whitney students are just like any other undergraduate, but in terms of maturity, in terms of life experiences, they're more like graduate students in some ways. And the Eli Whitney students community actually kind of straddles that, right? And so that's sort of unusual. And Alec is sort of very involved in the Yale community, and he is a teaching assistant, in his computer science classes and everything, and so it's sort of nice. You are a non-traditional student in a traditional Yale program.
Yeah. I do want to be clear too that like I said I live off campus, but like off campus is a 10-minute walk. Like it's not like I'm like on the other side of the city. And I've lived in two different places in New Haven as well. There's hot spots in New Haven where a lot of the Yale students live. So I've lived in East Rock for all of you prospective Yale students, and now I live in Worcester Square, which is another like Yale hotspot. So yeah, I'm very close by, not to be misleading.
Right. And I imagine, people within your complex close to you are probably also Yale students as well.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, you talked about academic advising and you're a TA. How do students find those opportunities? Is that, Patricia, you mentioned an academic advisor within the Eli Whitney Students Program. Can you talk to us a little bit about the support that's in place for students within the Eli Whitney Students Program?
Yeah, for sure. So before I even stepped foot on campus, I had Eli Whitney students reaching out to me, just telling me what I need to do when I get here, how to find housing, how to get set up with classes. And then also as a new student, you get an advisor. So my advisor was Professor Michael Fotos, who is an amazing human. He was one of my instructors at Warrior Scholar Project. He taught the Yale cohort. And it was kind of amazing because he ended up being my advisor. So I got to talk to him even more. And, he talked to me about how to set up my classes and how to balance my workload. And then in addition to that, we have Dean Sodi, who is I can't even put into words how amazing of a resource she is. She's there for everybody. She helps you with the entire process of onboarding on to Yale. I can't give her enough credit. So there's two resources in general. To expand on that, like academic resources, really you just have to keep your eyes and your ears open. There's tons of opportunities between residential college tutoring. So everybody at Yale gets assigned a residential college. Mine is Ezra Stiles. So there's tutors that work for the college. And then in addition to that, each class will have either undergraduate learning assistants or TAs, depending on the type of classes. And you can go to office hours and all that type of stuff. A lot of resources.
And Dean Sodi is the director of the Eli Whitney Students Program and also director of the transfer program for Yale College.
Oh.
And one of the things she does is she assigns sort of Eli Whitney peer advisors to incoming Eli Whitney students. So, if you're a 28-year-old, your peer advisor is going to be another Eli Whitney student somewhere between, mid-20s or later, versus having a peer advisor who's 19 or 20.
Traditional age.
Old, right,
Yeah,
right, traditional age. So I think they are better equipped to help incoming adult students transition to Yale.
Yeah.
Having said that, I also think some of the best resources for Yale Eli Whitney students are our traditional undergraduate population. They have been professional students for at least 12 or 13 years, and they are a wonderful resource for our non-traditional students as well. But it's again sort of nice. You have sort of the best of both worlds of both the resources the traditional age students get, as well as resources specifically designed for students who are at a different life stage.
Sure. And Alec, would love to hear from you in terms of what that transition was like from the military environment into a rigorous academic environment like Yale. How do you kind of navigate that transition? Right? You talked about all the support that's in place and certainly took advantage of that, but what was that transition from classroom like from the military for you?
So it all started with service to school, actually. So I contacted service to school and I talked to a ambassador, and I set up the whole process of working with service to school, and I had my advisor, and I heard about Warrior Scholar Project. And the first thing I did was I attended Warrior Scholar Project. Huge shout out to that organization. They do great work, and I credit a lot of of where I am right now to them. And then in addition to that, I worked with John Falcone. I want to shout him out by name because that's my service to school advisor, and he's great. Sorry, John, if you get a bunch of people hitting you up after this.
Absolutely. He's going to become our most requested ambassador now.
So I think it started there with my essay writing and just working on that. And then the first thing I did was I went to community college, and I just kind of worked on my academic skills. I didn't have a super in-depth academic record at that point, and I took classes for a year. And I think that was really, really good for me. Going from the military back to college can be kind of a shocking experience. I like to think of it like in the military, you work a bunch, but when you're off, unless you're on call, for the most part, you're off. Whereas in college, it's kind of like you go to class for a few hours a week, but then you have like 40 hours of homework. So it's a completely different experience, if you ask me, and you have to get a little bit used to it. And I did that in community college.
And Alec is sort of amazing, right? Because he's a computer science major, but Alec, you didn't have that much of a math background. You weren't a student focused on STEM.
No,
and
I wasn't.
Computer science at Yale is very, very challenging. So I'm just curious kind of how you went from kind of not having a lot of prep in STEM to becoming not just a computer science major, but being a TA?
Yeah.
Well, I think this leads into one of my favorite things so far about my academic experience at Yale is that you have a lot of flexibility with what you decide to take. So when I first came here, I thought that I wanted to study economics or psychology, and I'm still interested in those things. But of course, I kind of changed my path. So my first semester here, I set myself up to be ready to go into that major, but I also took this other intro to computer science class, and I really liked it a lot. It was really, really challenging, but there was a lot of resources and a lot of help from the course staff. So I was able to get through it. And I completely changed my trajectory. And the best part is that nobody questioned me or told me I couldn't do it. They just pretty much wanted to help me make it work. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And Patricia, that actually leads me to a question for you in terms of the admissions process. So a lot of applicants come to us and they, don't necessarily either have a strong academic background or they're like, I don't want them to see any of my high school transcript. When students are thinking about their academic background and applying to the Eli Whitney Students Program, is that something you like to see where the students do go back and take classes at a community college to strengthen that academic profile? Or, how can we better guide applicants as they're navigating, that decision of, do I go to community college or do I apply right away?
So while some of our successful Eli Whitney candidates had consistently strong academic records, many had weak high school or even earlier college records, but they then later took college courses and presented strong recent academic credentials and then became viable Yale candidates. So it really depends on your previous academic record. I think if, we have a first year student veteran in the first year program, not the Eli Whitney Students Program, and his high school academic record was good, and so we weren't looking or sort of requesting that he take more college classes. But for many of our student veterans, I think it is helpful to readjust to the academic world by taking some local college courses. And we recommend that they take liberal arts and science courses. No matter what a student ends up majoring in, they need strong quantitative reasoning skills. So we encourage students to take math classes, whatever is the right level for them at that point. And also to take classes that focus on analytical reading and writing, because whether you're a computer science major, an engineering major, English major, economics major, you're going to need to be able to write well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alec, I know as a computer science major, you were probably also going to get pinged in LinkedIn requests left and right, because that's one of the more popular majors that we see students signing up and saying they want to study. So can you talk to us a little bit about, the prerequisites, kind of how that process going from community college to studying computer science at Yale, how has that transition been? And what advice would you give to someone who is considering a very rigorous academic major in terms of preparation?
So I think that where this advice comes from is actually Patricia, because when I was in the process of looking at colleges, I spoke to a couple of admissions officers, including Patricia, and she gave me the advice that she just told everybody on the podcast. So I would highly recommend following it. Take those liberal arts classes, take writing classes, take quantitative reasoning classes, take your math, be good at that stuff. But I think that it's important to slow down a little bit. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a rush. I'm like, oh man, I gotta hurry up and do this amazing thing. I want to be great. But sometimes it's important to slow down and say like, hey, I need a really strong foundation before I can go on to those super advanced classes. So for computer science, I started with almost nothing. And I started in the intro classes, the most basic classes. And I went to all the office hours and did all the readings and watched all the lectures. And it was still really challenging. But I think that foundation both from community college and starting at Yale is why I've been able to make it to junior year as a computer scientist. And I think I missed part of your question. There was something else you asked me too.
No, it was just more around prep and how, you could, or advice you could provide to prospective applicants that were considering a competitive major like computer science at Yale. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, I've never taken a calc class. I don't have a strong math foundation. Patricia, I see you wanting to chime in there.
I also want to put in a plug. See, we're putting plugs, everywhere. Again, for the Warrior Scholar Project. Because some of their programs are specifically sort of designed for STEM students. Essentially, for those of you who don't know, the Warrior Scholar Project is a nonprofit organization that hosts week-long or 2-week-long academic boot camps in the summer to expose transitioning service members and veterans to higher education. It actually started at Yale. It was started by Yale students at the time, and now it's expanded to more than 10 campuses across the country. But some of them have different themes. Right. I think the one at UPenn is focused on business. There are some that are STEM focused, and I think that's also very good preparation. Alec, when you went through the Warrior Scholar Project, was that a STEM one or just a regular one?
I went through a humanities course at the time. This is economics and psychology, Alec. At this point, I had no clue I wanted to do computer science. So I went through the humanities course at Cornell, and it was a fantastic experience. Where I met Michael Photos, by the way, just so there's no confusion, was I came back to be a fellow with Warrior Scholar Project, and sort of, if you haven't gone through the program before, the fellows are kind of like the TAs of Warrior Scholar Project. They sort of like help you make it through the course and through the rigor of all the assignments that you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And to follow up, Patricia, with the original question from Sydney, I do want to encourage veterans that are either in the process of getting out of the military, or whether you're in community college or just looking to come back to school, to not be afraid to pick those difficult majors. If you think that you're interested in it, just take a class and see if you like it. Or if you're too worried to take a class, maybe watch some YouTube videos. Just don't be afraid to take on the challenge, because I would have never imagined myself succeeding in this major like 4 years ago, but here I am.
Yeah.
So you can do it too.
That's another really great plug, Alec. There's a lot of free online courses. I know Yale has some free online courses through Coursera or through edX. I always encourage students when like, I'm thinking about, going through computer science or business. I'm like, hey, go take some of these free classes, dip your toes in the water and decide if it's something that you're interested in majoring. But there's so many free resources out there for students to explore. Patricia, did you want to add something there too?
Yes. And I think with the Eli Whitney Students Program, it gives our adult students more time to figure out what they want to major in. Because they can take classes full or part-time, they have up to 7 years to complete their degrees. So they are actually in less of a rush. It's not that you are entering Yale as a junior and you have only so many semesters to complete your degree, and so you have to figure out what your major is pretty quickly. So I think that flexibility with the Eli Whitney Students Program is important. And I know Alec already mentioned that with the Eli Whitney Students Program, he was able to take some of his semesters part-time, and people do that for kind of different reasons. And, it may be that they're taking a really intense, heavy-duty computer science class, and so they want more time to focus on it, and so they don't want to be taking 4 or 5 classes that term, and you have the flexibility to do that. Or it could be that you are coming from a less rigorous academic setting and you want to ease your transition to the rigorous Yale sort of curriculum. And most four-year colleges and universities, or many of our peer institutions, you pretty much have to take, roughly four or
Full-time,
five
right.
classes per term. So this is kind of one flexibility that the Eli Whitney Students Program offers our
Yeah.
adult students.
Yeah. And Alec, you mentioned something along that same line. You mentioned when you were first coming on the show that you could have transferred in as a third year student, so as a junior, but you're deciding to do all 4 years there at Yale. And I love, Patricia, that they have up to 7 years to complete that degree program. But Alec, I'd love to hear, because we have that conversation regularly when people are like, oh, I already earned these credits, I already paid for them, I already did the work. And then, I kind of play devil's advocate and I'm like, yes, I understand that. And some people don't want to lose those credits, but other people see the value in spending all 4 years or even up to 7 years, to get that full experience. Can you help our listeners understand why that was an important decision for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came in with some credits. I was going to community college, like I said, and I had the idea that I was going to just graduate. Well, maybe not as soon as possible, but definitely not taking 4 years. I kind of had it like, I'm going to go to undergrad and then I'm going to apply to law school. And I have this grand plan about what I'm going to do. And then I got here and I realized how many opportunities there were between classes, clubs, study abroad, doing research, whatever you want to do, it's probably here. So I kind of felt like I was almost cheating myself if I rushed through. And also there were certain things that I wanted to work on. Like I really wanted to be more technically competent with computer science. I didn't want to just rush through that major. And I really wanted to be a better writer too. So even though I'm a computer science major, I'm taking some writing classes because, communication is great, super important. And we get to read some really awesome pieces. So yeah, basically just like slow down. It's not a rush. It might feel like a race, but I promise if you appreciate the journey, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yes. Another Eli Whitney student told me one time that he felt that Yale is a Disneyland for nerds. And I think that that's an apt description. And I do think that most student veterans coming into Yale, they will say that they are planning to take their classes full time. And they're going, it's the next step on their, as Alex said, grand plan. But once they arrive at Yale, they understand that the experience is so enriching that they want to spend more time.
Yeah. And I, for the most part, encourage students to, dive in, explore, everything that, especially some of our partner schools, but Yale and the community and the resources that are available to students. I mean, you will probably never get the opportunity to take a class for the sake of learning with Yale faculty members or to do some undergraduate research. So to be able to be in that environment and truly like be a sponge and soak it up as best as you can. Because I know now after I've graduated, I would love to go back and just be able to take a class for the sake of learning, or sit and listen to faculty members that are just pure geniuses, in their field. It's just really cool and exciting that, Alec, you have that opportunity, but that you're now able to, share it with our audience and students that also want that same love of learning in that same atmosphere. So,
yeah, the passion, I think, is something that I really notice here. All of my instructors are extremely passionate about what they do and they love it. And that's why they do it. My writing professor, I have never met someone so in love with reading and writing and helping people be better writers. And it's inspiring. It really is.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
so
sure it's
inspiring.
infectious, like being in the classroom, like feeding off of their energy. I mean, that's all you could ask for, in a learning environment. So one last question for both of you as we wrap up our time here today. Patricia, for students that are currently in the admissions process and are considering Yale, can you talk to us, how do they apply to the Eli Whitney Students Program?
Sure. Yale admissions officers reviewing Eli Whitney applications are all experienced in evaluating applications from adult candidates whose backgrounds, life, and professional experiences are likely to be very different from those who are applying to Yale as high school seniors. And so I want to reassure the student veterans and the adult students in the audience that we will view your application through a somewhat different lens. The application deadline is March 1st for fall entrance. We do not offer spring entrance. We use the transfer common application form. So you would select Yale as your college and then the Eli Whitney Students Program to get the application questions for the Eli Whitney Students Program. And in addition to completing the application form, we require 3 letters of recommendation as well as a resume. We recommend that at least 2 of the letters of recommendation come from academic instructors, and the other recommendation can come from the military or employer. We know, of course, that there are some applicants, if they haven't taken a lot of courses, they may not have,
Those
2 letters of
right?
recommendation from academic teachers, but try if you can, but it's always helpful. And veterans should submit their DD 214. And if they are a service to school participant, the vet link addendum is very helpful. And then the strongest and most interesting candidates are invited for virtual interviews with an admissions officer. So that's the admissions process in a nutshell.
Great, thanks. And then Alec, for you, for anyone listening, what advice do you have as applicants are considering their admissions journey or their transition out of the military?
I think the best advice that I could give is to choose something that you're really passionate about and just dive headfirst into that. And if you're not really passionate about something, maybe just sort of like broaden your horizons and take some classes that might surprise you, like that computer science class that I took that made me become a computer science major. I think it's important to slow down when you're getting out of the military. The military is kind of like a very fast-paced environment for 4, 8, or 20 years, however long you've been in. And you don't have to treat college like that. You can, especially if you come to Yale, you can slow down. You can work on your foundation. You can build up your writing skills and your math skills. Or if you go to community college, you can do the same. So I think my biggest advice would be to slow down. And in addition to that, I know this is a service to school podcast. I'm not just saying it because it's a service to school podcast. Find a mentor, whether it's through service to school or through a friend, or if you can't find anybody, contact me and I'll help you find somebody, or I'll help you myself. Just find somebody you can talk to that can work with you and help you reach your goals. You can do it. You can do it. If I could do it, you can do it.
Absolutely. It's that confidence piece and seeing someone who, was in their shoes and is now where they hope to go or see themselves in the future. So you, Alec, brought such a great addition to the conversation today. So thank you so much for being here. Patricia, thank you for, continuing to support student veterans as they pursue higher education and just continuing to be an advocate for the student population that we care so much here about at Service to School. So thank you both so much for your time. Alec, we wish you the best in the rest of your studies. And Patricia, we will continue to send you introduction emails and look forward to future collaborative efforts between Service to School and Yale. So I hope you both have a wonderful rest of your day and we'll chat with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney. This was fun.
That's it for this episode. Join us next week, same time, same place, where we share more Service to School stories. Service to School Stories is hosted by Sydney Mathis, the Director of Student Success, and produced by Amanda DeBias, the Director of Communication at Service to School. Service to School is a 501c3 nonprofit providing free college admission support to transitioning service members and veterans. Join us next time and follow us for more on all of your favorite social media platforms.